So, welcome everyone. My name is Anton Rhodes. I am the project manager of the Global MTCC Network, the GMN, which is an EU-funded and IMO-implemented project. I can see from the list of participants that we have people joining us from all over the world, especially from the Pacific and Asia regions. Thank you so much for being able to join this webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to provide an update on the development of IMO's GHG reduction strategy, and also to highlight some of the IMO initiatives to assist developing countries with the implementation of that strategy. A few practical instructions before we get started. I suggest to use Google Chrome or Firefox browsers, as these seem to work best for the webinar platform. Please use the chat to inform us of any technical problems. We can then write back to you and help solve the issue. The duration of the webinar will be around 1 hour, 20 minutes. And during the presentation, you can use the Q&A window to submit questions. And you can actually access the window by clicking on the lower right of your screen, next to where it says chat. After the presentation, we will reply to questions in the same order that they've been submitted. So you can see here the agenda for today's webinar. We're going to start with a presentation on IMO regulation and policy for GHG reduction. And this is followed by a presentation on IMO partnerships and projects. We'll then have a short film and presentation on the GMN project. And finally, we will finish with a Q&A session. You can see here the speakers for today. So we have Mr. Camille Burgoyne, IMO Technical Officer. We have Mr. Jose Mathikel, Chief of the IMO Department for Partnerships and Projects. Ms. Petra Gassemi, who is the GMN Project Officer. And also joining us for the Q&A session, we'll have the heads of the Maritime Technology Cooperation Centers, MTCCs, for both Asia and Pacific. So we'll have Mr. Zula and also Mr. Weiran. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Camille, to provide his presentation. Over to you, Camille.
Thank you, Anton. Hope you can hear me now.
We can hear you loud and clear, Camille.
Fantastic. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all. Greetings from Europe. I hope first that yourself and your loved ones are keeping safe. Thank you for attending this webinar today. I'll be with you for the webinar, and I've been asked first to set the stage. I think my slide. Anton, maybe can you display my slides, please? Okay. All right, I think this one is okay. So I've been asked to set the stage on shipping and emissions. So briefly, in a few minutes, I'll start with that. By reminding first, of course, the importance of shipping as a service in our global economy, as an essential service, providing over 80% of global trade in volume, over 70% in value. it was from the last figures we got from UNCTAD in 2018, over 11 billion tons transported by ships in 2018, a growth of around almost 3% compared to 2017. And importantly, developing countries account for more than 60% of that volume of cargo. Next slide. According to UNCTAD, again, last review of maritime transport dating back from last year, world seaborne trade is projected to grow annually by around 3.4% between 2019 and 2024. And during in that last version of the review of maritime transport, UNCTAD identified uncertainties derived from geopolitics, trade tensions, and also trade and also shifts in globalization patterns, such as more regionalized trade. One thing that UNCTAD at that time, of course, could not identify was the impact of the recession due to COVID-19, its impact on global trade. I understand that in its next edition of the review of maritime transport for 2020, UNCTAD will have an important focus on that. We can already see in recent projections that UNCTAD projected a 20% drop in global trade for 2020. Trade contraction, as you can see in the chart below, that is deeper than the financial crisis in 2008. UNCTAD predicts that nearly all regions will suffer double-digit declines in trade volumes. So far, North America and Asia hit quite hard. And it also has an impact on emissions. Very quickly, because we're talking about emissions today. Global CO2 emissions for 2020 are estimated to decrease by 4 to 7%. But when it comes to the impact on the emissions accumulation pathway, it is expected to be actually quite low, and will also depend on the recovery curve. For shipping, while emissions in 2020 and 2021 should be significantly lower, in the mid and long term, the impact is likely to be rather small. I think that was important to have this brief note on the impact of COVID-19. Shipping emissions, according to the last official IMO estimate in 2012, international shipping accounted for around 2% of global CO2 emissions, and it represented approximately 800 million tons of CO2. In this third IMO greenhouse gas study dated back from 2014, the projections were 50 to 250% increase by 2050 in business as usual scenarios. And we are currently finalizing the fourth IMO greenhouse gas study, expected to be published, at least approved by the IMO by the end of the year. It will update these projections. And another important aspect of the general picture of GHG emissions from ships is, as you can see in the chart on the right side of the slide, the importance of several sectors, in particular the container, bulk, and the oil tanker sector that represented a major part of shipping emissions. While regulating shipping emissions, we're mostly talking about greenhouse gas emissions today and the impact on the climate system. I've put as a reminder these famous charts on the right, where you can see the direct correlation between CO2 accumulations in ppms and in the atmosphere, and the temperature anomalies. And shipping's contribution to that is, as I said, around 2%, but it still is rather significant, and we have our role to play, of course. But there's also emissions of what we call local air pollutants, also ozone depleting substances. So um, the service provided by shipping has also negative impacts on the human health, on the environment, on the ozone layer, on the climate system, and these are the reasons why we need to have a regulation of these emissions. A specificity of international shipping is that it's by nature an international activity that needs to be regulated internationally. And this is why IMO is for. Actually, IMO is the first, it's a primary regulator for international shipping. It's a specialized agency of the UN. It is composed of around 300 staff members in London, but most of all, it is composed of 174 member states and lots of non-governmental organizations and intergovernmental organizations. Because what makes the IMO is actually those that take decisions, the member states. It is an intergovernmental process, and ourselves in the Secretariat are here to really support the member states in defining future regulations and also support them in implementing this regulation. Next slide. The important piece of regulation for emissions is MARPOL Annex 6, the International Convention on Prevention of Pollution from Ships. This important international instrument prevents operational pollutions from ships, different sorts of discharges, but the Annex 6 is specifically focusing on atmospheric pollution. Chapter 3 is covering various types of air pollutants, and Chapter 4, introduced in 2011, focuses on regulations on energy efficiency for ships, addressing the climate issue. So I'm going quite quickly on that, and I think this last slide is sort of an introduction to my next presentation. Will we take questions now or at the end, Anton?
Camille, the questions will come at the end.
Excellent. So I think I'll directly jump into my second presentation. So thank you for your attention so far, which is an update on the implementation of the IMO greenhouse gas strategy. So there'll be a basic reminder on the initial strategy itself, some update on the current developments in its implementation and the perspective we have. Well, first of all, I should say that IMO's work on greenhouse gas emissions did not start in 2018 when we adopted the initial strategy, but really already in 1997 when MARPOL Annex 6 was adopted and was included in the regulatory package. There was a specific resolution on CO2 emissions from shipping. There's been several steps where the international community, IMO member states, have progressed to address these emissions, to also better know the emissions from shipping. As I said, international shipping is international by nature. It is quite difficult to allocate emissions from ships to specific countries under UNFCCC's nationally determined contributions. Therefore, the main instrument, the main contribution to addressing greenhouse gas emissions from shipping is actually through the IMO. And the strategy adopted in 2018 is really a key element of the IMO's contribution, as it sets the stage. It really sets the framework for future action. I'll go a little bit in detail now. Uh, an important aspect of this strategy is the vision that is stated by IMO member states. IMO remains committed to reducing GHG emissions from international shipping, and as a matter of urgency, aims to phase them out as soon as possible in this century. Well, that was the first time a vision to ultimately phase out GHG emissions from ships was stated from IMO, and it now gives us the direction. The ultimate goal is to phase out emissions. It's not only to further limit or reduce emissions, it really is to phase out these emissions. And this vision is that of IMO member states, and I think it now is also the vision of the sector. It really is the vision for the whole industry. Supporting this vision in the strategy are what the strategy calls levels of ambition. It's pathways and targets in the short, mid, and long term. We have, first of all, reducing the carbon intensity through the implementation of further phases of the Energy Efficiency Design Index for new ships, which is currently ongoing. We have a 2030 target, which is to reduce carbon intensity of international shipping as an average by at least 40% by 2030 compared to 2008. And we have a third goal for 2050 to reduce total annual GHG emissions from shipping by at least 50% by 2050 compared to 2008. And this represents, according to projections of transport work, around 75 to 80% reduction in carbon intensity per ship. So that's a significant commitment, and that's a significant effort as well. To support this vision and these levels of ambition are a list of candidate measures with timelines. Short-term measures are to be finalized and agreed between 2018 and 2023, midterm measures before 2030, and long-term measures are those measures identified to be finalized and agreed beyond 2030. The initial strategy also identifies the need to assess the impact on states of candidate measures before adoption. And that's a very important aspect also of the work we are undertaking at IMO. And a revised strategy is to be adopted in 2023. Okay, I think I'll switch this one and directly dig into the recent achievements and the implementation. The first of all, as I said, was a focus on the EDI. So EDI phase 3 requirements have been strengthened. The amendments now need to be adopted by the committee. Well, unfortunately, you may have heard that due to COVID-19, all formal meetings and physical meetings at IMO have been postponed so far, and the IMO Council is currently finalizing the reconstruction schedule, the reconstruction of the agenda schedule. I hope we will have a clearer picture in the coming weeks when it comes to physical meetings or potentially virtual meetings, holding discussions and formal discussions to in particular progress on these issues. There's as well a correspondence group working currently on the introduction of a possible EDI phase 4. Some recent achievements on the implementation of the strategy. There was a focus on ports. It was identified in the early discussions on the strategy that shipping alone could not, I mean, strictly speaking, shipping alone could not achieve the goals and would need the support from a wider spectrum of partners, including the ports. And so we have this resolution that delivers a strong message to encourage cooperation between the port and the shipping sectors to contribute to reducing GHG emissions from ships. And it identifies a wide number of possible actions, including delivery of onshore power supply, delivery of port incentives, the delivery of alternative fuels at the port, etc. And this has really been taken on board by many ports around the world and many organizations, so that's quite satisfactory. On ports as well, the IMO Global Industry Alliance, which is a public-private partnerships with a selection of companies involved in shipping, has been working on just-in-time arrival to reduce emissions from shipping. The technical cooperation effort is accelerating really. Maybe I go quickly through it because Joe's will be more detailed later. In particular, since the Department of Partnerships and Projects was established earlier this year. We also have a focus in the strategy on encouraging actions as well at the national level. We cannot afford having any level of decision ignoring the commitment of the IMO strategy, and everyone needs to be on board. So there's also this encouragement for member states to develop national action plans to support reduction of GHG emissions from international shipping. And this draft resolution should be considered by MEPC 75. Okay, a bit longer on that one. The last intersessional working group on greenhouse gas emissions was actually the 6th edition of this group last November, agreed on the need for a short-term measure, mandatory, goal-based for existing ships to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and keeping in mind the 2030 level of ambition to reduce carbon intensity by at least 40% compared to 2008. And this is the main focus of this group today. This discussion is really progressing. There are different proposals on the table to amend MARPOL Annex 6 and to include in particular, that's the technical approach, to include design improvements through the energy efficiency existing ship index, basically applying the EEDI to all ships, to existing ships as well, associated in particular with engine or shaft power limitation. And we also have operational measures proposed, working on the operational performance, energy performance of the ship. So there are proposals to make the SEMP, to audit the SEMP on a regular basis, to set mandatory carbon intensity indicators, what we call CII, with annual reduction targets. Proposal as well to set up a mandatory carbon intensity rating mechanism for ships to incentivize those more performance ships. So this is currently under discussion. There's also intense discussions on how to combine elements of these proposals. And with a view to facilitate further consideration of these proposals later this year, we have held last week an informal virtual discussion session, which was one of the first IMO virtual meetings, with a very good level of attendance and very informative Q&A sessions, which hopefully I think really helped people understand the technicalities of the various proposals and yeah, improve their understanding. So that I think was a very, very successful session. And in parallel, we have to consider the impact assessment of candidate measures. Key elements to be discussed soon. The fourth greenhouse gas study, as I said. The first report of the 2019 fuel consumption data to be submitted by the Secretariat, which we're happy actually to say that we've received more than 80% of fuel consumption reports that we are supposed to receive so far. EDS phase 4 corresponds group, as I said. We're also working on methane emissions, and we're also working. That's a very important aspect, and it sort of is a transition to the next step. How to incentivize the uptake of alternative low carbon and zero carbon fuels. It becomes extremely clear now to everyone that we won't reach in particular the 2050 level of ambition with energy efficiency improvements only, and we need to really see zero emission vessels entering in the market soon. We need to encourage and really accelerate the uptake of low zero carbon fuels. You probably can see that this is becoming important focus for ship owners themselves. They're looking at various options, and so there's a dedicated work stream on the development of life cycle GHG carbon intensity guidelines for all relevant types of fuels. So this is also an important issue we are discussing in the GHG working group. I also included here the proposal, which is not for the International Working Group, but only for the MEPC, for an International Maritime Research and Development Board, IMRB, which is supported by many industry NGOs, which consists in raising small contribution on fuel sold to finance R&D projects in the shipping sector. Because we know the targets, but I have to say, we don't know exactly what will be the pathway, the fuel pathway in particular. There are various options how to reach the 2050 targets. We're also dependent on the decarbonization of other sectors, in particular the energy sector, and so that really is something many people have in mind now. What is the best option for my ship, for my ships in the future? How to also get the available fuel, for which kind of operational patterns, in which region. That really is a question people are starting to consider now. And since in the past in the past and still now, shipping is highly dependent on fossil fuels and HFO, MGOs, which are quite simple fuels, I should say. Stable, they have the same characteristics everywhere in the world. And so this fuel mix is changing. We don't know exactly how it will change and what will the marine fuel mix look like in the future. There is lots of options. This table you can see shows different parameters of various fuels, LNG, methanol, ammonia, hydrogen, etc., and their characteristics, the advantages and drawbacks. There is no silver bullet. There is no perfect fuel. The future fuel mix is expected to be more diversified than it is today. That is quite obvious. and hence probably the importance also of fuel flexibility and bridging technologies. With that, and that is my last slide, I should really emphasize the need for cross-sectoral collaboration and partnerships, and I think that will be a nice transition towards Joe's presentation. But really, there is a need for an unprecedented level of cooperation across the entire maritime value chain. And I have to say, we are quite happy to see how the sector reacted to the adoption of the strategy, with the multiplication and acceleration of many initiatives. You have the Poseidon principles in the banking system. You have various initiatives launched by the IMO, and we're really proud of them. You see now various initiatives taken in different regions. You have initiatives on focusing on R&D. You have the Getting to Zero coalition, etc., which is a wide coalition of ship owners and also partners that aim at facilitating the uptake of zero-emission vessels by 2030. These are very good signals. They show that the sector has really embarked into the IMO, I should say, decarbonization voyage. The other aspect of it is it's absolutely crucial for IMO member states that nobody is left behind. Hence, the need also to accelerate the technical cooperation effort to also address the specific challenges of certain regions, seas and elder seas in particular. And the IMO will continue to play this role to, on the one hand, support a strong, ambitious, realistic, also regulatory framework, and support also its implementation all around the world. Thank you very much for your attention. I hand over to you, Anton, and then Jose.
Fantastic. Camille, thank you very much for that presentation. I think it sets the scene nicely by explaining why GHG emissions are, they are an issue for shipping, and, what is the strategy now to reduce those emissions. Also nice to have an update on what are the current discussions about implementing the strategy. So yeah, I think that set the scene very nicely. I think it's very nice as well, Camille, that your baby son was able to join us. He's obviously a big fan, so that's nice. Just to let the participants know, if you have any questions for Camille, then please submit these through the webinar, and we can pass them on to Camille during the Q&A session. We've already got quite a few questions come in from Paul Gunton, from Maria Kolos, from Jae Moon Lee. So Camille, if you can stay with us for the Q&A, that would be fantastic. I would now...
Apologies, my baby is leaving, but I'll stay with you.
Okay. I'd now like to introduce our second speaker, Mr. Jose Mathikel, Chief of the IMO Department for Partnerships and Projects. Over to you, Jose.
Hello there. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. Fantastic. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. It's a great pleasure to be here today, to be with you. And it was great to also that we had Camille giving us the background to the whole issue. And thank you all for joining us. We all know that you are doing in your own bit to contribute to addressing this issue of emissions around the world. So let me begin by thanking all of your efforts, and also for thanking for your time for being here with us. Now, Camille had given us the challenge that we face and what work is going on the regulatory side. And as you know, that there's a lot of need from the developing countries to implement the GHG strategies and other IMO regulations. And technical cooperation, therefore, becomes an extremely important function for IMO. And I will be talking in that context and what all we are trying to do to assist the developing countries to implement the GHG-related regulations and the strategy among other regulations as well. I guess I can move the slide here. Yes, so I will today talk about the new department that IMO has set up. The Secretary General recently took a decision to establish a department of partnerships and projects. And this is mainly to build new partnerships around the world and implement major projects in various areas of that IMO deals with. He saw the need for an increased focus on this area. And without partnerships, nothing much can be done. And therefore, this department was formed, and I'm heading the department. And in the second part, I'll quickly run through some of the major technical cooperation projects that we do in IMO on GHG matters. So this department, just one slide on the department, it will have 4 functions. One will be developing partnerships, partnership with international organizations, partnership with the countries, the donors, private sector. We need all kinds of partnership, and one of the focus for us will be developing these new partnerships. We would also need to mobilize resources, because without resources, human and financial resources, we won't be able to achieve much, and so that is something that will be our focus as well. We will also be trying to promote innovation out there, and IMO could be a catalyst in encouraging innovation out there in the field, or something that we engage in. And finally, project implementation. Once the donors bring the money, and then we get into the implementation mode of these projects. And these are the 4 functions of this department. Now I will quickly run through some of the projects that we do related to emissions. And let me begin with the project that we did in the past and just concluded, and just as a background to this, and that was the GEF UNDP IMO GLOME project, the Global Maritime Energy Efficiency Project. And that was a foundation project that laid the foundation for IMO's technical cooperation work. And this included around 10 countries participating in these countries as a pilot phase. And you can see some of the names there of the countries there who participated in this phase. And the focus of this project was on legal policy reforms, capacity building, and public-private sector partnership. And it also generated a number of toolkits, ship emission toolkit, and port emission toolkits, etc., that they can download from this project website. Be a very useful tool if you wish to refer to those emission toolkits that might come handy for you. We have been doing a lot of capacity building in these countries, and also we established the private sector partnership. And this is what Camille mentioned before, establishment of this global industry alliance, a significant development from IMO side in striking this partnership with a number of interested private sector companies who would like to come around a table and work together to develop solutions for this issue, focusing on especially energy efficiency technologies, alternative fuels, digitalization, etc., etc. We have right now around 14 major companies who are partnered to this in this alliance. That's a snapshot of those companies that you can see. There are some very major companies involved in this partnership. So from there, we also have another project, which is a glow fouling partnership project, mostly an invasive species project, but you can see hull fouling is also contributing to the emissions. And this project, in a way, is trying to address that issue of reducing hull fouling to address 2 issues. One is invasive species issue, and other one is an emission issue. And the project is almost the 2nd year of implementation. And these are the countries involved, and it's quite a global project. And in the future, we will be organizing webinars on this particular project. This project that probably you're all waiting to hear, this is the network of maritime technology cooperation centers. We thought about creating this network because network have the power to amplify our efforts. So when these networks are connected, then we can really see the impact around the world because they are all well connected, they communicate, and the impact is then passed on to the nearby countries as well. So this was the idea of creating some centers of excellence in the different regions and then connect them together as a network. You will hear more about this from Anton and other colleagues. I'm just trying to see if I can, okay, yeah. So basically the idea was to create these centers of excellence around the region, and they can create sub-centers in those respective regions. And you will see that that is being done right now. Even sub-centers are being created. So hopefully we can have a much bigger global network who will be supporting the countries on issues related to the greenhouse gas emission. Now, the latest project is the IMO's Green Voyage 2050 project, and this kick-started soon after the IMO strategy was adopted, when Norway came forward to support this project with a view to support the GHG strategy. And this is a long voyage, as you can see. That's why we named it as the Green Voyage 2050, trying to match with the IMO's targets. And see how we can take this journey together to support the strategy. And we call it Green Voyage. Green Voyage basically will be focusing on 3 areas. One will be on continuing the work we did in the GLOMEEP on the legal policy reform process, that we help the countries to have legislations and policies in place. We would also continue our capacity building activities. There will be training workshops, there will be tools development, et cetera, or model legislations, and all those aspects will happen in that. However, the focus of this project is going to be a lot more on technology and solutions and demonstrating some of the solutions out there. And this is a horizontal expansion of the GLOMEEP project, which means we'll have new countries getting onto the legal policy reforms, and a vertical expansion of the GLOMEEP, where some of the the GLOMEEP countries will actually try to get into the pilot demonstration of technology. So that's how the project is designed. So it's just about to start the project, and we have completed the country selection process and hope to roll out the project implementation very soon. Another area I would like you to keep an eye on is this Maritime Innovation Forum on low carbon shipping, which we would like to organize sometimes early next year. It was supposed to be this year. We had to postpone it due to the unexpected circumstances. This is also funded by Norway, and we'll be working with the UNEP to jointly organize this forum. So please keep an eye on this particular development. I think I'm almost to finish by just saying that partnership is so key to address our issues. The challenges appear to be significant. Actually, it was a movie, but I can't show the movie here, but it is, I'm just reading out. The challenges are very insignificant, but they are not insurmountable. A lot of progress is being made, a lot of efforts being made, including your own efforts in various parts of the world. And I'm sure with efficient and intelligent use of the resources and the goodwill, and by developing true global partnerships, we will be able to win this battle. And once again, I know that all of you are contributing to this cause, and in addressing this issue in your own ways. There are, I can see from the list, there are various organizations attending. They're all there doing their part. And I really would like to thank you for your efforts. And we do hope that some of you would be interested in knowing more about this project, and maybe interested in partnering with us in increasing our efforts around the world. So I think that is my last slide. Once again, thank you so much. It was a short presentation, just running through the various things, a glimpse of things that we do. If any of you have any specific questions on these projects, please do not hesitate to contact me at that email. Once again, thank you so much, and hope all of you are staying safe. Please continue to stay safe. Thank you very much.
Just Thank you very much for that presentation, and great to hear about some of the wider IMO initiatives to support the strategy. So thank you very much. Unfortunately, Joe's cannot stay for the Q&A session, but in his absence, I will do my best to try and answer any questions related to the new department for partnerships and projects, or any questions related to some of the other projects which Joe's highlighted. I'd now like to introduce a short IMO film which focuses on the work of the GMN project, specifically in the Pacific region. The film is also a very nice introduction to explain what is the project and how it is helping countries to reduce GHG reduction. I should add that when the film was made, the GMN consisted of 5 regional centres, but recently one of the regional centres covering Latin America is no longer operational. So we have just 4 regional centres now. The film is just under 10 minutes long, so please get comfortable and enjoy.
Cutting greenhouse gas emissions from shipping and ports relies heavily on energy efficiency and low-carbon technologies. The GMN project, funded by the European Union and implemented by IMO, is tackling this head-on. The project has established a global network of 5 carefully targeted regional maritime technology cooperation centres, or MTCCs. They're helping developing countries make substantial savings by improving their shipping and port operations. This is a global project and it's having an impact in all 5 regions.
Climate change has no borders. It is a global issue and only globally can be tackled.
To get a real feel of exactly how it's making a difference, we visited the Solomon Islands to find out in detail just what impact it's having there. Now, in the shipping and port industries, estimates say that emissions could be reduced by as much as 75% just by doing things a little bit differently and using technologies that already exist. Aranda Kotelawala is the Chief Executive Officer of the Solomon Islands Port Authority. Aranda and his team are working closely with the MTCC Pacific on a whole range of energy-saving measures. Hi, Aranda.
Hi, good to meet you. Actually.
Great to meet you too. Great to meet you too. So, you're going to show us around the port now. Show us some of the things you're doing differently here to try and save fuel, save money, and make the whole thing more efficient.
Absolutely. Actually, let's take a walk around the port, and I'll show you actually what things.
Let's go. Do I need this?
You need this extra.
Cool. Let's go. Here in the capital, Honiara, MTCC Pacific has helped carry out a full energy audit of the port so they can plan where savings can be made. And one of the most important areas is the lighting.
This is the new 30-meter LED lighting poles we installed.
They're replacing all the existing port lights with new, taller and brighter LED lighting powered by solar panels. Perimeter lighting to comply with IMO's port security regulations is also solar powered, and they're giving back to the community by powering some of the street lighting too. This shed roof will also be covered with solar panels to provide power for day-to-day operations in the port. And of course we simply had to come back to see the lights in action, and that means at night. And as you can see, it's pretty impressive. Here in Honiara, the savings actually begin as soon as the trucks enter the port area. Now that truck that's just driven into the port has been through a weighing in motion system. Now weighing the trucks and their containers while they're moving means they don't have to spend time waiting with their engines running for the containers to be weighed. Now that both helps cut down greenhouse gas emissions and it improves air quality in the port. By moving containers around the port with these lightweight trailers, they minimise use of the heavy lift units, which are really fuel thirsty. Even something as simple as repairing cracked and broken road surfaces in the port can make a big difference. Vehicles don't have to rev their engines to get through the ruts and the potholes. Honiara is the main trade port of the Solomon Islands, but there's also a big commercial fishing operation based on one of the other islands. If you eat canned tuna, there's every chance it might have come from here. We're in the port of Noro on the island of New Georgia in the Solomon Islands, and I'm going to meet Glenn Joshua, who's the Energy Efficiency Manager for the Port Authority, to find out how the MTCC project has been helping them here.
Hi, Lee.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, pleased to meet you, sir.
So Glenn, this is a major tuna port. Can you tell us how it works, how all the parts fit together?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. The fish actually is being caught in Solomon Islands waters and then brought in by ships into the port of Noro, and then the fish is discharged from the ships and then put into the containers, into the reefer containers, and ready for shipment into Europe and other parts of the world.
The reefer containers, they need power, obviously. So what do you use to generate the power for the reefer containers?
Currently, we are using conventional power, which is fossil fuel. Eventually, our thoughts are build a 1 megawatt solar farm here that will help us save energy and to power these reefer containers.
So we've seen some great examples of how the MTCC project is helping the ports in the Solomon Islands to improve their energy efficiency and make savings. But the ship owners want to get in on the act too. Let's go and meet a couple. So Simon, you're participating in the MTCC project by providing fuel consumption data from your ships. Now, why is that important?
Yeah, it is important for me. In this part of the world, Solomon Islands, fuel is very expensive. And if I can save money on fuel, then it will be a great advantage for me.
So explain how that works. How does providing data actually help you to make savings?
Collecting fuel consumption data on board our vessels, and then we supply this fuel consumption data to the MTCC team. And then the team will analyze the data and they will provide us with the technical recommendations on the efficiency and fuel consumption.
Okay, that's great. So the project is providing practical assistance to local ship owners here in the Solomon Islands to help them become more energy efficient and save money.
The local ship owners also recognise the environmental gains. This is Joy, and she heads a family business running one of the largest inter-island trading vessels.
MTCC has given us a new learning opportunity, a new learning curve to manage our operation efficiently and also to look after the environment that we serve in.
There's a clear link between energy efficiency and addressing climate change. Basically, the more energy efficient you are, the less fuel you burn, and that means your greenhouse gas emissions are reduced.
In the Solomon Islands, we saw for ourselves exactly how the GMN project is really helping to improve energy efficiency there. But that's just one example. It's the same story throughout the entire GMN network. MTCC Caribbean, for example, is coordinating regional efforts in 2 pilot projects. One, to establish a baseline and cost-benefit analysis for different energy efficiency technologies, and the other, a system for collecting fuel consumption data. There's a similar focus at MTCC Latin America. They've organised several workshops throughout the entire region for maritime authorities and others. MTCC Asia is developing a software tool to help ships' crews record fuel consumption and working on ways of optimising the angle at which ships float in the water, known as trim, to improve their performance. And in Africa, the project has developed standardised e-forms for tablets, enabling ships' crews to input key consumption parameters to be processed and analysed. World leaders, including UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, have identified climate change as the defining issue of our time. The GMN project is one example of how a collaborative global initiative can translate into local action and make a real difference.
Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed the film. As I said, it's a nice introduction to the work that's been undertaken by the MTCCs in their respective regions. And as I mentioned earlier, we have on this webinar the heads of MTCC Pacific and MTCC Asia. So if you have any questions about their work, then please submit them through the webinar. We now have our final presentation from the GMN project officer. So I'm going to hand over to Petra, Over to you, Petra.
Thank you, Anton, and good morning, good evening, everyone. So the film focused particular attention on MTCC work in the Pacific region. And with this presentation, I would like to highlight some of the broader GMN achievements and also focus on the type of services now provided by MTCC. One of the key GMN success stories is that the centers have established strong regional networks through interactions with port and maritime authorities, private ports, shipping agents, cruise lines, and so on. And through this kind of outreach, and also through the establishment of industry and government focal points across the regions, their influence has grown. And as a result, the MTCCs are becoming important regional players in the field of maritime and GHG issues. The centers are also working to identify opportunities where they can support existing regional strategies. For example, MTCC Pacific is engaging in discussion with other regional stakeholders on how to enable a joint approach to maritime transport, and is exploring avenues on how to engage with other centers, such as the Micronesian Center of Sustainable Transport, to uncover synergies and areas where they could strengthen their partnership for the benefit of the whole region. But there is also deep connectivity at the global level through the collaboration between MTCCs in areas such as pilot projects, technology transfer, future sustainability. And in that way, Asia is linked with Africa, Pacific is linked with Caribbean, and so forth. Now, as we saw in the film, the focus of GMN has not only been on vessels. MTCCs have also worked with selected ports to help make energy efficiency improvements. In the film, we saw good examples of the work being undertaken in the Pacific, but I use this opportunity to also mention that similar audits were undertaken in Africa, in the ports of Mombasa and Douala. And both the Pacific and Africa audits are good examples of how the best practices were implemented and will not only help to streamline operational costs, but also reduce GHG emissions. Let's move on to capacity building. Since the MTCCs became operational in 2017, over 50 capacity building activities have been delivered with 2,400 attendees from various parts of the maritime sector, as well as 30% female participation. And the activities have covered a range of topics, promoting the standards and measures outlined under MARPOL Annex 6. And the main outcome of the workshops is improved capability of the maritime stakeholders to develop and adopt standards for more sustainable shipping. Another notable achievement is the development of a strong technical expertise by the MTCCs. A few months ago, all MTCCs completed their pilot project, and that included two main components: the collection and analysis of ship fuel consumption data and technology transfer. So under the ship fuel consumption data project, stakeholders were informed on technologies and a data baseline was created. And the ship operators could then evaluate how energy efficiency improvements can be made. Under the technology transfer component, the MTCCs have promoted the uptake of low carbon technologies and operations. For example, MTCC Asia, by using machine learning, satellite communication, and data processing technologies, they've been instrumental in improving ship trip optimization, which leads to power saving and reducing GHG emissions. MTCC Asia has then circulated the new guidance to thousands of vessels. All MTCCs have developed technology needs assessments. They highlight technology demand and availability in particular country. And these assessments help the region to outline a regional approach for the uptake and diffusion of energy efficient technologies. One of the great success stories of the GMN has been its expansion. The MTCC Asia team established branch offices in Cambodia and Myanmar in 2017 and 2018. And MTCC Pacific launched a Samoan branch office in 2019. And since their launch, the branch offices have been involved in organizing various technical workshops, carrying out online courses, supporting pilot projects, carrying out national needs analysis and other related activities. Now, based on almost 4 years of successful operation, the MTCCs now have the experience and they have the technical know-how. And so they are able to provide the following services: delivering capacity building activities, management and implementation of similar projects planned within the regions, as well as identifying potential project opportunities for optimizing energy efficiency in the sector, providing technical services related to maritime climate action, and also providing advisory services and access to MTCC's data banks. Now, focusing on the immediate future of the GMN project, in 2020, the main focus of the MTCCs is to disseminate the result of their pilot project. For example, producing new guidance material and sharing recommendations to improve vessel performance. Another key area of focus is to encourage technology transfer through delivery of regional conferences and technology exhibitions. Here, the purpose is to provide a platform for technology providers to reach out to the respective regions. And on this topic, we would love to hear from technology providers who might be interested to participate. So please drop us a line to find out more information. Focused on MARPL Annex 6, the MTCCs will continue their important capacity building work through national workshops and technical training. But of course, all of these plans have now been impacted by the global pandemic. To mitigate against the pandemic, the centers are now implementing plans to deliver activities remotely. And the bigger events, these are being put back into 2021, so that there is still a chance to deliver them as originally intended. Now, another key part of the MTCC 2020 work program is to implement plans for financial sustainability. The current financial model based on the EU contributions is scheduled to end in 2021. We expect that in the future, the funding model will adapt from having a single revenue stream to multiple revenue streams. And key amongst this new financial model will be funds that can be generated from the MTCCs themselves. And as I have already described, the centers are now well positioned to provide a range of services. To conclude, I would like to emphasize 2 points. The first is that MTCCs are now well established and respected in their regions. They have a strong technical expertise and a proven track record of successful delivery. And the second point is that these MTCCs are now perfectly positioned to support and potentially partner with all other regional and global initiatives. So MTCCs are open for business. And on this point, I encourage others to work with MTCCs and use this great resource which has now been established. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. To find out more about GMN, please visit our dedicated website at gmn.imo.org. And if you have any queries, please do email us, the GMN Project Coordination Unit, at gmn@imo.org. Thank you for your attention. Anton, back to you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Petra. I think with your presentation and also the film, we all now have a much clearer picture of the MTCC's work. So thank you very much for that. We now move to the Q&A session. That's the final session of the webinar. So if we move to the next slide, you can see here the panel who will be participating in the Q&A. throughout the webinar, we've been receiving questions, so thank you very much for submitting these. If you've not done so already, there's still an opportunity to send us questions. So if you have anything to ask about the GMN or any specific questions for our NTCCs, then please submit now. If I can ask the other panel members to turn on their screens now, and also to turn on your microphones. So I can see Zula and Camille, Petra and Weiran. Nice to see you all and welcome. So what I'll do now is read out the questions that have already been submitted and I'll direct them to different members of the panel. So let me have a look here. Okay, so Camille, as your presentation was first, we started getting questions for you. The first one, Camille, what is IMO's current view on assessing emissions from well to wake or from tank to wake? The initial strategy is not clear about that. Is that okay, Camille?
Thank you. I approached my microphone because I understand I may not be very clear during my presentation. Thank you for the question. As you probably know, so far, IMO regulation in EDI in particular adopts a tank-to-wake approach with a carbon factor associated to each different fuel. But you may also have noted that the strategy envisages in the short term the development of life cycle GHG carbon intensity guidelines for all types of fuels, and this is envisaged to prepare for an implementation program for the effective uptake of alternative carbon and zero carbon fuels.
Camille,
that is a complex issue. How to take into account the upstream emissions. There are currently several proposals on the table. For example, provide detailed information on upstream emissions in the bunker delivery note, or other proposals. And I think this is while this is still an ongoing discussion. There is, I think, a common understanding that that these upstream emissions cannot be fully ignored, and I agree that really is an important aspect. Unfortunately, during last week's decision, discussion, this issue, as well as the issue of methane emissions or VOCs, could not be discussed since we focused on the development of short-term measures aimed at improving the carbon intensity of existing ships. I hope this clarifies.
Thank you, Camille. Yeah, personally, there were parts which I couldn't hear. I'm not sure if it's the same for other participants. It's very clear, and then it fades away. So I'm not sure if you can tweak your audio setting. Okay. In the meanwhile, we have a question for Weiran. I think this is directed for you. Weiran, can you share more information on your ship trim optimization work, and can you also give some information on how this work will be disseminated? Sorry, Weiran, we can't hear you. I think you're still muted.
Oh, yes, I just turned on my microphone. Thank you very much, Chairman, and also good day to everybody all over the world. The trimming optimization technology is mainly researched and also utilized by the NTCC Asia for a kind of a pilot projects. The idea is, of course, to first of all collect the large quantity of the data, which includes the ship movement information, and also the ship particulars, and also the consumption of the fuel oils of the ships, selected ships. Say, you know, we have collected 5 bulk cargo and 5 containers and 5 oil tankers. And when we get a series of you know, continuous data and information from the ships, and then we devised by using the artificial intelligence technologies, AI technologies, together with, of course, the practical maritime operations on board. And then we have such kind of application, you know, to analyze scientifically, reasonably, scientifically, to help the ship operators to understand the best and the optimized, you know, condition of the vessels in different voyages, so that we can realize the, you know, reduction of the carbon dioxide from the ships. And this is, of course, the main technological work done by MTCC Asia. And then based on such kind of research work and also practices, and we formulated, according to the latest IMO requirements for an operational guidelines from IMO conventions and the regulations, we devised the 2 guidelines for ship operations, trimming optimization, and we circulated to the vessels through the Maritime Safety Administration, through the international shipping companies, through the pilot station, and through the our 2 branch offices, and you know, the other ways, so that we can circulate about 2,000 vessels. This is a way how we are doing here for the trimming optimization technologies. Yeah. Andrew?
Warren, thank you for that. Appreciate it. We have a question here for the panel. What do the panelists think of EU's decision to include shipping's carbon emissions in the EU ETS? So that's the emissions trading system. So that's open for all the panel, if there's any response.
So, Anton, maybe I can try make a very short, how can I say, the introduction in that special issue. We think that, you know, the market-based GHG control measures is one of the alternatives, you know, in the discussion, you know, by IMO, by EU as well. And this is, of course, we can push forward the implementation of the IMO emission strategies. You know, it's helpful. But of course, a lot of work has to be done, you know, before the realization of the ETS, because first of all, we should understand, you know, the how to what extent, to what amount we have emitted, you know, from the vessels into the GHG emissions. So we have to understand, we have to calculate first. That's why my understanding is that we have to have the data collection. And of course, we have to refine it, you know, again and again. So this is a very important and fundamental work we have to do. And of course, next stage is, of course, to understand, to set up, you know, the cap, you know, for the emission of the carbon dioxide from the ships from different countries and different fleets. And this is, of course, a huge work to do in the future. And then, of course, then we have to discuss about the trade schemes. And there's some legal points we have to and administrative work we have done as well to set up, for instance, the responsibilities, the compensations, the trade, and the, buy and sell, the quantity of the emissions, etc., etc. This is very rough understandings, but I understood once again, and this is a way, this is already, discussed probably, but it takes a long time probably to have this kind of decision. Yeah, thank you very
much. Thank you, Weiran. Is there anyone else who'd like to respond?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's still coming in and fading away.
Yeah, so very briefly, we often tend to oppose IMO and the EU. I would just like to highlight the complementarity between IMO and the EU. I think all IMO member states are actively working towards implementing the IMO strategy, and I think the whole IMO community is actually very lucky to have the expertise of EU member states, the active participation in the IMO discussions. This project, GMN, is also an example of how the EU can contribute to technical cooperation activities. We've also noted with great pleasure, I think, recent initiatives to support R&D projects on fuels in particular in the EU. So just to emphasize these other issues, these other aspects I think the complementarity between IMO and the EU.
That's great. Thank you, Camille. There's quite a few questions coming in now. Zula, this one is for MTCC Pacific. It's a statement and a question. In developing countries in the Pacific, the need is for demonstration projects to convince ship operators of benefits. Is it in the plans of MTCCs in the next 5 years or so? Solomon Islands would be keen to host demonstration projects.
Yes, thank you, Anton. Well, good evening, everyone from Fiji. Thank you for the question, though. Actually, of course, what we have done in the last 3.5 years in the Pacific region needs to be continued and replicated in the other region. And in case of the MTCC Pacific's plan for the future is to continue with the demonstration projects in the maritime sector. So what we have done so far is 2 demonstration projects, one in Vanuatu and the other one in Samoa. And in addition to that, we have also carried out some good work in ports, more specifically in Fiji and in Solomon Islands. So to continue this particular work in the region, we need to carry out more demonstration project. And at the same time, the important component of our work is also the data collection, which we actually need to create a baseline information and look at some of the technologies that could be adapted on the existing vessels. So as far as MTCC Pacific's work goes, of course, we would like to continue the work that we are doing in the Pacific, and hopefully we can look at doing a pilot project in Solomon Island with one of the ship operators.
Great, excellent. Thank you, Zula. We have a question now which relates to the GHG strategy. Do midterm measures envisage market-based mechanisms similar to ones used by IMO? Perhaps that was meant to be used by EU. Camille? Yeah.
Well, yes, the strategy identifies in the midterm, so between 2023 and 2030, the consideration of proposals for what the strategy calls new innovative emission reduction mechanisms, possibly including MBNs, to incentivize GHG emissions reduction. The strategy also identifies that certain mid and long-term measures will require work to commence prior to 2023. Well, all depends on proposals that are brought forward by IMO member states and international organizations. But I think we expect in the coming years to have such proposals on the table, indeed.
Yeah, Camille, there were quite a few questions on that, and I think with that answer, you've I think satisfied everyone. So let me move to another one. We have another one relating to the trim optimization. So I think this is a follow-up question, Weiran. Can participants use trim optimization software or application? If yes, how can we get the materials or the source? So I think this is relating to your work, Weiran, and the new guidance that you've developed.
Okay, thank you, Anton. Thank you for the question. Yes, of course, you can use the trimming optimization software. Okay, first of all, but we have to explain further that the trimming optimization software has to be used in combination with the large quantities of the data. So it means to some extent it's kind of a tailor-made. I mean, you have to train your vessel before using the trimming optimization software to make decisions. So it means that yes, we have to collect the data. We have to input the data into the system, train them to be more and more clever, intelligent, so that the result could be more correct in this case. If you are interested in this software or technologies, maybe you can contact our technical department. We have actually Dr. Chen is in this group in the webinar as well, and maybe he can answer as this question as well. But before he's answering that, I would say again that the trimming optimization technologies has to be, our plan is to develop further and further. I mean, the trimming optimization software, by incorporating it into the modern technologies. Maybe in future, I mean, I'm talking about future, that we can incorporate this technology into the mass, because in future, I mean, the vessel should utilize all intelligent technologies, all informations for safety and also the pollution prevention, including the GHG. Professor Dr. Chen, are you in the group?
We have a limit on speakers, but better, if the person that asked the question can send an email, they can send it to the GMN team, and we can forward it to you, and we'll put you in contact so that more detail can be provided. I have another question. Is there any special energy efficiency regulations of IMO for inland going vessels? So Camille, I guess this relates to port side and linking up with the rest of the kind of logistics chain, and whether there's been any developments in that area from the IMO side.
Maybe tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is more of a legal question, whether basically MARPOL Annex 6 applies to ships engaged in rivers only. If that is the case, that I think a quick answer is to say that it's I think a decision of the party to MARPOL Annex 6 whether to apply these regulations to ships solely operating in rivers. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea categorizes pollution from rivers as land-based sources. So MARPOL may not necessarily apply to ships solely engaged in rivers and not navigating in the marine environment. So I think it's a convention interpretation issue, and yeah, again, it is a prerogative of parties to decide whether to apply. I know that some countries, some member states are actually fully transposing IMO regulation, in particular MARPOL Annex 6, to ships solely operating in rivers. Some others don't. So yeah, that I think is my basic answer.
Great, thank you, Camille. The next question, and this is for the MTCCs. I'd like to ask how MTCCs take measures to apply scientific findings and technical data to policy and lawmaking decisions. Have there been any efforts in this area? So, is it understandable for you?
Yeah, okay. Maybe I can try to answer this question as well. First, and yes, from our understanding, all kind of research work has to be transferred and to the practical operations. So in MTCC Asia, our plan and our typical operation is that we develop our technologies based on the systematic maritime technologies. It consists of, for instance, the data and its analysis, and the development of the systems, applications, software. And this is, of course, very important. We develop our own capacity and technical development by using our capacities in MTCC Asia, in Shanghai Maritime University. And the next one is, of course, so we have to test it again, and we have to do it as well by trying these technologies on commercial vessels until it becomes matured to use it on board the other vessels. So this is a way. And the second point. The last one is how to make it into the policies and laws. And yes, and MTCC Asia think it is also very important to move the practical applications on board into the laws and the policies, together with the Maritime Safety Administration and also authorities, including China. And we are also very happy to develop these kind of policies and law making, maritime laws and regulations with other administrations in other countries. And so this is the typical understandings and typical operations from MTCC Asia. Yes, Anton?
Yeah.
Thanks, Warren.
Hi, Anton. If I may just add what Professor said. Well, for us in the Pacific, of course, the science and the techniques that we have used on the ground is used by the countries to develop policies. For example, if you are looking at like in the private sector, the work that we have done in the ports, where we provided the technical assistance to conduct energy audits, we helped the ports to develop energy management plan and also energy policies. And on top of that, the data that we are collecting from the ship operators are from domestic vessels, and we are also working on the legal side of providing the member states with the draft shipping act that can be enacted in the country in terms of making data collection mandatory, and at the same time looking at buying newer vessels that are more efficient. So the work that we have been doing in the last few years is underlining or making a foundation for the Pacific states to utilize the information that we have gathered and use that in terms of on a higher level to report their NDCs, for example, and also it contributes to the SDGs of the countries.
Great. Thank you, Zila. Thank you very much. I'm very conscious of the time, so we'll just have one more question. Camille, there is a question about your presentation, and you mentioned a proposal for an international maritime research and development board. Do you have more information about this board that you can share?
Sure. To make it short, it's a proposal made by industry associations to MEPC 75, which was supposed to be held in April, May this year. The proposal hasn't been formally considered so far, because as you understood, the meeting has been postponed. But basically the proposal is to, well, it first sees the need for further R&D efforts to reach the levels of ambition of strategy. It also considers that these R&D needs to be financed, and the proposal is to set up a maritime research and development board financed by a mandatory contribution of initially they proposed $2 per ton of fuel oil purchased for consumption. And they envisage that this mechanism would enable approximately $5 billion to be raised over a 10-year period. And basically the proposal, the board would define and fund an international R&D program to facilitate the uptake of low carbon and zero carbon fuels technologies for use in the maritime sector. So we've also received a few commenting documents from several member states. So it is an important proposal. It is quite timely in that for sure research and development is needed. Acceleration of R&D in this sector is needed. But there is also concerns that need to be addressed, and I think many people are looking forward to starting this discussion at the IMO, and discuss those various concerns and see how this can be moved forward.
Great. Thank you very much, Camille. There are more questions, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. So it just remains for me to thank the speakers and panelists for their great contributions. I'd also like to thank the audience for your participation and for the many questions that were submitted. We hope that you enjoyed the webinar. If you'd like to find out more, then please visit the GMN website at gmn.imo.org. Or if you want, you can send an email to the GMN team, which is gmn@imo.org. Apologies if we didn't answer your question, but please send them to the GMN team, and we can follow up with those questions. So thank you all, and goodbye, and wishing you a very nice evening and afternoon. Thanks very much, everyone.